So, welcome to this artist conversation today on the art of celebrating loss. This is part of a programming series that's inspired by the Supernatural America exhibition that's up in our Target galleries. I encourage you to see it if you can. It explores the unseen and the world that we're going to address a bit today, and how we can each honor our ancestors and the spirits that are around. So I'm not going to do a lot of the introducing. We're all here to see Khusaba, who brought together, yes. Hey! Yes. She brought together a wonderful, wonderful panel of artists. And I'm just going to turn it right over to her. I feel very blessed to be a collaborator with Khusaba over the years. Khusaba Seka and I hosted some healing circles during the Art of Healing exhibition, and it was life-changing. It really made the space a space where healing felt possible. So without further ado, as they say, Khusaba Seka.
You know, I got to step on my step stool so I can see my mama back there. Welcome, everyone. Who wants to breathe with me as I try not to spill the water on the computer? So Krista gave me a little fact backstage. She's wearing her grandmother's coat that her grandmother would wear out when it was time to be fancy. Who else is in the audience representing their ancestors today? I see you, Leslie. Anybody? Beautiful. So, as the elder in my life, I'd like permission from my dad to start. Dad, is it okay for me to start? Thank you. Mr. Willie Younger. People send me pictures of him that they've taken from like bus stops, cars. I seen your dad on the car. I'm like, wow, you guys are stalking my dad. Can you calm down? But he's a cool dude. You can see that. Worthy of stalking. Hotep, Alafia, and welcome. I'd like to welcome people of African descent, Black, African American, Asian descent, Arab descent, European descent, those who identify as Hispanic, Latinx people, indigenous to this land, and people of mixed multiple descents. I'd like to welcome all of our bodies, minds, hearts. I want to welcome how your bodies and the different ways you experience yours. This may include chronic pain, strength, tension, disease, and mental health challenges. I'd like to welcome people of all genders. This may include people who identify as women, men, transgender, queer, or other. I'd like to welcome languages spoken here: Spanish, English, indigenous languages, Yoruba, Patois, Somali, sign language, your language. I'd like to welcome people with disabilities, visible or invisible. I'd like to welcome gay, lesbian, bisexual, heterosexual, pansexual, queer, or other from whom there is no name or labels that fit. I'd like to welcome survivors. I'd like to welcome people who identify as activists and people who don't. I would like to welcome single, married, partnered, dating, in monogamous or polyamorous relationships. I'd like to welcome those in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. I'd like to welcome your emotions: joy and bliss, grief, rage, indignation, contentment, disappointment. I'd like to welcome your families, genetic or otherwise. I'd like to welcome people's faiths, religions, traditions, faith practices, private practices, not belonging to a tradition, agnostic, atheist, and seekers. And yes, I'd like to finally welcome the ancestors who are indigenous to this land where we are now: Dakota, Lakota, Nakota. Anybody else of indigenous descent can speak their tribal name if they'd like it this time. Iroquois. That's my mom. Taino. Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome. Choctaw. Thank you. Cherokee. These are the people that lived in this land before the Europeans came, and I'd like to acknowledge their spirits and welcome them to this place. Welcome. All right. May the ancestors be pleased. So what does celebration got to do with grief, loss, and how we feel when we lose a loved one? A lot of us get dressed up, we make our best dishes, we cry, we sing, we dance, we give thanks, we laugh, we make fun of each other, and sometimes it sounds like a contrary way to celebrate when we should be grieving someone's life. But in this picture, a lot of you know that I'm not a churchgoer, but I put on my fanciest church hat. I ordered it special because my godmother had passed. She helped raise me, June Remus, and there's a picture of her a little bit later in the slideshow. We all dressed in white, as many of us as possible, to give more light to her journey. And when I showed up at the church all dressed up in my church hats at All God's Children over off a lake, people were surprised to see me in a church hat, but I said, this is what my godmother would wear to my funeral, and that's how I honored her. So yes, a lot of us do smile as we're grieving. We do other things too. Sometimes it's self-care, sometimes it's self-medication, but one of the best ways to make sure you're honoring yourself is to feel your feelings. I want to share with you that in 1992, I became a mom. Some would say this is a loss for me, or was a loss for me then, because I was teen mom, I was unwed, I was from a poor home, and there was concerns that I had lost the freedom and the opportunity to further my endeavors to go into leadership. I did a lot of public speaking, I traveled, I was on boards, I was on committees. But this is when I came into my sisterhood. I inherited a community. I was welcomed in, and I did my womanhood training with the Kefren Society. It was where I was also presented, maybe 2 years later, to the cultural community during the first day of Kwanzaa, and pledging that I would uphold the African tenets of Kwanzaa and the 42 laws of Ma'at. And my community recognized me as a sister and a mother and a daughter, and not as a demographic. And it's where I was able to really be received and put in place some important life practices for all my children, especially my daughter at that time. These are some of my Kefren sisters. Akmeri is the one with the sunglasses. She's a doula. I think all of you, maybe not all of you, but a lot of you have heard her name before. Sister Akmeri helped me give birth to both my sons. My grandson was coaching and dueling, but not in person because COVID had happened, with my granddaughter, and then my next granddaughter as well. So she has helped bring in 2 generations of the Seka family. I'm in the middle. I'm about 21. And the sister that has the green necklace around her neck and no sleeves, that's Sehet Wasati Tatsiaka. She invited me over and over and over again to her sisterhood circle. And we've known each other for over 30 years now. These are the sisters who have built altars with me. I want to go back and say that this was a very special day in our community because we did a bimbe. And a bimbe is a celebration. And some traditions that practice Ifa, Santeria, Condomble, Lukumi, New World Yoruba worship, it's a way to bring the spirits down. And so we wanted to celebrate the Kefir. We made a beautiful, as big as that screen, Kefir that day. And so it was my first introduction on how to invite spirit to come into a space. Now, in my tradition, possession and mounting happens. It's called being ridden. And people do get taken over by spirits. Sometimes it's ancestors, sometimes it's a deity. And sometimes they provide messages, but a lot of times they dance and go closer to the drums. Uh, and it's a beautiful experience for those who get to witness and those who are the channel for this experience at that time. Hotep sisters. I had to give a nod to my Kefren sisters because there was times where, as a young mom, a single mom, a mom getting ready to get married, and a mom saying goodbye to a marriage, that they built altars with me, put fresh water on my altar, brought me flowers, brought me candles, and helped me build my altars. This was a simple little altar that I did to welcome them into my home. So any sacred space that you build, is an invitation for someone to have a feeling and a reaction, and I consider it an altar. When you're building your altar, it is a space for healing. Your altar building is a practice that should center, it should connect, and hold space for healing, a space for remembering and recovering. You'll look around the room, hopefully, before you leave, and you'll see the altars that we personally built and that the community built. And there's names and there are objects, and I want you to take that all in. Some of us carry our altars with us, pictures of last loved ones, pendants, rings, all kinds of things. Just remember that. This is a picture of my daughter, Khusaba Seka. She wasn't even 3 yet. She's about to be 30. It took me a whole year to be able to say that she was about to be 30. You'll notice there's some cloth on the floor, and then there's a table with a cloth on it. On the table, there's some pyramids, there's some candles, there's a plant. The basket is an African basket that survived many years, and then there's actually some photo albums underneath. That's our family altar. But my daughter liked working on altar so much that I made one on the floor for her. So the plant's cut off, but there's some cowrie shells and a bowl of water. And this was her space to pour kabez, to pour libations, to pour and give thanks and connect when she was a little girl without me saying it's time. Because everybody who works with spirit, anybody who wants to acknowledge their divine within themselves, anybody who wants to connect with the divine that's greater than them should be able to do it on their own time and how they feel fit to do it. And that's what I wanted to teach her by making her own altar. In building altars, it's an opportunity to open the lines of communication. When you're opening the lines of communication, it gives you an opportunity as a person who's lost someone who you're not on speaking terms with to build that space again or build that space for the first time. It's also an opportunity for you to sit with yourself because sometimes we're in inconsolable grief. When I lost my granddaughter, my first granddaughter, we were all in inconsolable grief. We were so taken back. And I will share that I was there when the coroner came. It was very hard to watch my bonus daughter need to hand over her daughter to the coroner. And the only reason why she was able to was because the coroner was pregnant herself. The love of others, the ability to connect and understand will take us far, but being able to have people with you as you grieve is very important. And when you don't have people that understand your grief, your altar is a sacred space so that you can feel heard. You can do the work on your own. So I invite you to use your altar in this way. If you are adopted or you can't find part of your lineage or you don't know part of your heritage, this is a really good way to build it. I will say to you that I know people that have been adopted, don't know one of their parents because they're in the foster system. Maybe they don't know their father, and they've worked their altar until they can get some answers. Maybe they've done 23andMe, maybe they've gone to a root worker and done investigations spiritually and got some leads. I encourage everybody to make an altar so that if there's a lost loved one that they can't name, that they can't find in their bloodline, this is a good way to invite them spirits forward, whether they're still living or if some of the people have passed away. I love this slide. Rev Patience, did I steal this from your Facebook maybe? Yes, I did. We're going to have Rev Patience speak in a little bit. The ancestors correct me, direct me, and protect me, but they never neglect me. So this is so very true unless you neglect them. I have a family member, and I won't name which family member it is, and I said, do you want to build this kind of altar? They said, no, because if I have to work with it every day, I don't want to disrespect. Very wise. If you want to build an altar, you can make a temporary altar, or you can make an altar that you keep all year long, a seasonal altar, an altar for a particular person. You do want to honor it, though. It's a relationship. You don't want to ghost your ancestors. You just don't want to do that. They will wake you up. They will slam your closet doors. There's all kinds of things that you don't want to stir up. So do it with respect. Do it with the guidance of an elder. Do it with a purpose, not just to have power over something, but to feel your own sense of self. So building an altar should also be, can also be a memorial to your loved ones. A lot of us that built altars for this particular exhibit today, we did it with our loved ones in mind. And I'll have the other altar builders speak on what they did. But to memorialize is one of the strongest ways to have not only a connection to your loved ones, but a line of protection. You know, you want to be fortified, you want to be cleared. The remembrance will be a beautiful thing in their honor, but also you want to illuminate their path. You want to build a space for their ascension and your own healing in you grieving the loss of them. It's not just a space to commune, but it's a space for your healing. And I'm going to keep on saying that. This is my pappy, William Lee Kimmy, and I told this story not too long ago. But my pappy, let's see. My grandmother has had many husbands, and her last husband sat by her side and held her hand as she held his hand. And we were all in the room, all 5 of her children, myself, my sister, my brother, as we waited for him to take his last breath. My brother sat on the counter, passed gas. We laughed at him, he laughed at us, and we made such a ruckus in that hospital room, nobody would have realized that we were losing a loved one. But the love that our family has for each other was so powerful and so evident in that room that day that the children that weren't his, that were from another marriage, were in that room. That his ex-wife, my grandmother, husband was holding her hand, and that we could all be there. I remember saying, well, can't we just take his mask off? No, it's his oxygen. Let him be comfortable as he's passing. It's just an amazing thing to be able to sit next to somebody as they're passing, and you know and you expect them to pass. It's a feeling that is a lot easier when you don't expect somebody to pass. But I put his picture here because he's one of the first people that I ever had to mourn or grieve, and that I didn't have a strong relationship with, and that I felt I have built a strong one with now that I have added him to my ancestor altar work. But I love that we came together as a family and celebrated him through laughter, and we were just totally ourselves. This is my granddaughter, Diana Bella Marie. She lived to be 3 months and a week old. And I think she made my altar work more for the community than for myself. She's the first person that made that happen. My work no longer belongs to me because of her. So when it marked a year after her passing, I took her memorial flyer out of the book I was keeping it in for a year, and I put it in front of some pictures, and I said some prayers, and I sat with her. And that's how I celebrated that I got to spend the time I did with her. This is Hope Swan. She was one of my first sisters. My brother has 2 children with her, and I have other nieces from her as well, but she died of cancer. Having a big sister was really special. Sometimes when I read people, she is one of the people that gives me the message to channel to others. I celebrate her. Her daughter and her grandson just had their birthdays, and she was just a beautiful light. Everybody loved her. So, hey, Hope, thanks for being here today. This candle was made by my daughter Stephanie to honor her dad's passing, Patrick Seka. I thought she did a really good job, and he kept my name, so I put him in my slideshow. We were together for over 10 years, and we have 2 beautiful children, and I got to have some bonus babes because of him, and I feel really blessed. If anybody's seen my altar, his 3 books of Kefir are on that altar, and I'm thankful and grateful for the expansion of my family and my ability to be a other mother to his children. So, not the last trip I took to Minnesota, but definitely one of the most recent ones was to honor my aunt, Darla Macheski. She used to cut my hair because nobody knew what to do with it, and I would have a little afro. And it's funny because underneath my head wrap, I have an afro now, pretty much the same size. She used to cut it. She loved to dance. She loved music, live music. She loved to travel. And I loved what my aunt and her daughter did to memorialize her. The flowers, the plants, it was all a nod to the things that she loved. And I had to include her today because she also comes through very strong and has been a beautiful light in my life. This is my auntie, Miss June Remus. She's holding me in this picture. And in our tradition, we actually do not have pictures on our altars where there are the living and the dead together. But since this is not an altar, this is my favorite picture of her. I wanted to include it. She's probably one of the most magical people I know. She had this confidence and this laugh that was amazing. And the best way I knew, she's the one I wore the church hat for, y'all, and went to all my God's children, excuse me for mixing up the name of the church, in that hat. Because she was just that fancy. So this is my nod to her and the ways that she was a strong person, and it was infectious, whether she knew it or not. So this is my most recent grief, and at the same time was able and willing to celebrate him. This is Mr. Ray Thompson. If you know Mr. Ray Thompson, would you raise your hand? You guys look around the room and see who knows Mr. Ray Thompson. Raise them high. Do you see how many people know Mr. Ray? That's because he used to walk up and down our block, say hi to everybody. Everybody knew his dog. Everybody knew his car. This isn't the fanciest car he had. This is one of his cars. But, he made sure our block was safe. He wouldn't let nobody litter. Pick that up. What are you doing? You don't live here. Pick that up. Patrick, come on. His dog was as big as his water bottle. This man was like 6'4", booming voice, right, Dad? From Chicago. My dad lived in Chicago too, and they had their moments where they get to reflect back on, what was happening in Chicago, where to visit the next time they went back home. So Mr. Ray, I had to give a nod to him because he was truly about community building. We got to be in a bike program together. That was awesome, where we lent out bikes to the community. So maybe you didn't have a driver's license because you're undocumented. Maybe you didn't have a driver's license because you couldn't afford to pay your child support. Maybe you didn't have a driver's license because you were scared of driving a car. Maybe you were just a kid trying to have fun during the summer. Maybe you were a woman that's husband wouldn't let you drive. And so we would borrow them out bikes, and he would make sure to load them off the truck, tune them up. We'd fit the helmets so they'd be safe. We just did all this work together, even though we began as neighbors. He was right next to me at first, him and his wife, Gloria, and their children. And then they bought the lot across the street, and they built a really fancy house. And I will miss him. I will miss him a lot. A woman armed with ancestral woman is an unstoppable force. I always say I'm competent in the ways of my people because I've been trained in the Kefren way in womanhood. I've been presented. I've been initiated into the Ifa Yoruba practice of Orisha worship. And I do sometimes feel like an unstoppable force with my sensitive self. And other times I don't. And that's the perfect time to go to my altar. This is one traditional altar. Here, this woman has pictures of her family, candles, water, dolls, a mortar and a pestle, and she is deep in communion. This is an ancestor altar. This is an Orisha altar. The reason why I made sure that Ashun was present today, even though she's not my Orisha, I love her so, because when I am grieving, she is the one that I feel is the most helpful in my practice. So I encourage all of you to take a little touch of Ashun. That could be making sure that you have some fresh flowers in the house if you're not ready to build an altar. Have something sweet. Make sure that you are maybe in your most comfortable clothes. Maybe do your best to say something sweet to somebody else to lift your own spirits. Light a candle, light some sage, because she's all about beauty. She's all about attraction. She's all about shifting through the magic of intention. So Ashun is one of the altars I wanted to make sure you all got to see today. This altar, as a intuitive reader, is what I build for my clients that read with me. So a lot of times I will do automatic writing, but I also pull stones and other objects to let them know what Spirit is saying. So this altar was built for a client that I was on an actual Zoom call with. During this call, I asked if they wanted a picture of their altar, and they said yes, so it got sent to them. And then it's dismantled, and then I start all over again. Sometimes one person has one stone, sometimes they have many, sometimes they have a whole bunch of writing on their paper that I use, sometimes they have nothing. But other than celebrating a loved one while you're mourning their loss, you can also consult with a medium, a psychic, an intuitive reader, however they identify themselves, to make that connection a little bit clearer and stronger of what you want to hear from them. Maybe there was a message you feel like you need because there wasn't enough instruction when they passed. So I invite you all to make sure that you know the ways you can be a part of staying in touch with your loved ones you've lost. This is my website where you can book me for readings, presentations, consultations, and you can talk to me later about this. Altar building is also utilized to bring your visions into fruition and your intentions into the tangible. So what do I mean by that? So beyond grieving, beyond trying to celebrate someone's full life, are you trying to buy a house? Are you trying to get married? Are you trying to have a child? Are you trying to take care of something, build something that you need support on? Build an altar. Put a little house on there if you're looking for a house. Make a space where you are putting your intentions in the tangible, maybe with a crystal, maybe with an image you built, a doll. These are all ways that you can use your altars. What I've learned through altar building and what I feel I've accomplished too is it's been a system of me giving thanks, getting direction. It's been a safe place for me to grieve. It's been a safe place for me to recognize how my body is feeling and how my mind is responding to it, or how my body is responding to my mind as well. It's been a great place for me to listen and to feel confident and believe what I'm hearing in terms of what Spirit is saying to me. I am recognizing joy a lot easier. I'm also making it a mission in my everyday life throughout the day to experience joy, and my altars remind me to do that. I've made at least 30 altars in the last year, temporary, permanent, for public, for private, and I've also been making altars for the last 30 years. I know I don't look 30. That's okay. You don't have to believe me, but it's been 30 years. As an Orisha worshiper, I have like over 10 consecrated pots that I keep track of, work, keep clean, keep fortified, feed. And then I currently help other people build ancestor altars who want to learn how to fortify themselves in that way as well. So, the art of celebrating loss. It's just that, it is art. Art is the commemoration, an outlet, a focus, a purpose. It is an expression of feelings that want and need to be conveyed. In creating our altars, we do celebrate a space to stay connected and the energy to live on even when the void and the pain exists because of that loss. Which brings us into being much more balanced than we were when we started our grief. In an attempt to not lose ourselves, the visual tribute that we create as artists or as people in the art of making an altar is the same. And when creating that portal of intimate understanding and communication, we have made some art. So please know that your sacred space can be private and public. It can be secret and sacred. It could be celebrated and copied and enjoyed. This is my logo. Accepting self as the highest consciousness of all. These slides are a little mixed up, but that's okay. Shameless plug. That's me. Okay, so appreciated altar builders. My altar is in the back of the room. I hope you see it. It is a tribute to my biological family members who have passed away. Christine Schroeder also built an altar. I will show you hers now. That's mine, sorry. Here on my altar is the 3 books of Kefra from my ex-husband. I have mine, but my daughter lent me her father's. The Underground Railroad information of how enslaved people were able to move to freedom, a Holy Bible, a list of my ancestors, a cigar, some Florida water, flowers, and some candles. The 4 pennies you see is a divination system called Obi. We can do that with coconut shells, the meat of the coconut, cola nuts, and cowrie shells. There's some candy because my ancestors wanted something sweet. This is the community altar. You'll see it behind you. It's above the, what's it called? The fireplace. Many people were here yesterday. They came to make candles in remembrance of their loved ones. Keegan Exvey did a beautiful job. I think I said your name wrong, sis. I'm sorry. Avi, thank you. So I know her by her original last name, but I'm not going to put her on blast like that. So she led this artist, this artist time, this open art studio yesterday, and boy, it was beautiful. I got to do some spiritual readings for people, and many people said to me, I wasn't going to come because I didn't want to celebrate the loss, but I got to let it go. I got to heal. I know they wouldn't want me this sad. I'm actually mad. I can't believe this happened. Oh my God, thank you for this. And some people stayed all day long for 4 hours. So thank you for that, Keegan. Christine Schroeder's is behind us, and she's going to talk to us a little while later about what her altar is about. Beautiful. Our honored guest made one. I'm actually going to read a part of this altar right now. Give me a minute. It says, Minneapolis Police Department Form CSC-35, Resignation. Rationale for resignation. I am formally informing the department that I am terminating my employment as a police officer with the Minneapolis Police Department. My last day will be May 25th, 2022. I will continue my career within an organization better suited to community safety. I am submitting this voluntary resignation in favor of renewed efforts to arm the city charter to disable the police department and replace it with a community-led Department of Public Safety and Justice Services. By supporting the disbanding of the police department. I also support decertification of the Minneapolis Fraternal Order of Police who consistent protection of officers' misconduct and obstruction of reform of the department has harmed the public and misled the profession. By supporting this disbanding of the police department, I also support decommissioning all precincts buildings into community centers for health services, conflict mediation, and other amendments determined by community members. Finally, I support the immediate disarmament of all uniformed officers. Currently, the Minneapolis Police Department operates by use of force standards that endanger the public we are sworn to protect. Future protocols on lethal use of force should consider residency requirements and professional liability insurance for those licensed to use lethal force in protection of the public to mitigate incidents of negligence and malice. Safety may be achieved through consent and cooperation, de-escalation, and communication may save more lives than justified use of force. Upon establishment of the Minneapolis Department of Public Safety, I am open to playing a role in service to the new scope, intent, and policies of that department. Didn't hear you. Ashe. Disband, disarm, decommission, desecretize. Rev Patience is here. She's going to be speaking with us in a minute. Let me read her bio. Reverend Patience is an internationally known spiritualist, psychic, medium, paranormal, consultant, investigator, spiritual life coach, advisor, natural health coach, and teacher of folk magic. She has been an ordained minister with the Universal Life Church since 2001. She gives spiritual guidance through her ministry YouTube live show, Spiritual Tea Time with Rev Patience, on Wednesdays, 8 o'clock my time, Eastern Standard Time in Tampa. My daughters know not to call me, or they know I'm not going to pick up because I'm watching her show. She strongly believes in the rights of all people from all spiritualities, religions, to practice their religious, spiritual beliefs, so long as they do not infringe upon the rights of others and are within the law of the land and one's consciousness. God, Goddess, Spirit, Loa, Saint, without intolerance or antiquated religious dogma. This is her altar. And I'm going to go back to Christine Schroeder because I'd like to read her bio as well. Oop, I pushed something wrong. I might need help. I think I got it. Christine. As a psychic, intuitive, working for more than 20 years, Christine has honored her craft to meet the need of a wide variety of clientele. Christine's insights are profound and her demeanor is genuine. She is a warm and welcoming person with a simple philosophy about psychic abilities. Christine says everyone can recognize their intuition. Psychic abilities are merely that, intuition put to use. Her belief is that psychic abilities is not unique to anyone. It is simply another aspect of everyday life that has yet to be explored to its full potential. And now we will have our panel. Welcome. So I asked Christine Schroeder to come and build an altar because I love her. No, but really, there's been a lot of guidance that you've given the community. So I'm going to ask you some questions about how you feel about altar building, your work, what you do, who you are. And I'm just going to move my stuff out the way so you can have enough space. So, who are you? What's your name?
I am Christine Schroeder, and I've been at this a long time. I do both intuitive work and mediumship, and I have done readings for people that have crossed over for many, many years. And that's kind of how I started with my altar building. in my experience, communicating with the dead, they love to be recognized. They love to be acknowledged. And I thought, I do that for myself a little bit, but I don't do it as much as I should. And that really started me venerating my loved ones and giving them daily acknowledgement for what they do for me, for who they mean or what they've meant to me, and just their everyday experience that I have with them. Oh, a little closer? Is that a little better? Okay. I think the other half of my altar is about everyday life. That's about me. That's about what I need to see happen, the people in my life that mean something to me, what I believe spirit and energy and the universe is doing in conjunction with me, what I can do for others with that. That's my piece of the altar.
What's your favorite piece on your altar that you built for us today?
Interesting question. I think for me, the most favorite part are the photos of both my father and my grandmother. You can see them up top. Gonna get a little emotional. They just mean so much to me, and always have. And so it's just a way to kind of bring them here today, and they're having fun, I can tell. And it's a way to every day acknowledge what they are to me and how they guide me in my life. My grandmother and I were called Pete and Repeat. She had every bit of fun I ever could have was had with her. Everything I needed to know in life, she was going to tell me, and she still does. So,
How did you become an altar builder?
I became an altar builder kind of late in life. You would think that with the work that I do, I would have done it sooner, but I didn't. I started it probably about 10 years ago, and I started it literally because of the people that I would read that have crossed over, and it gave me pause, and I thought, I'm not doing enough to support that part in my life, and so that's what I chose to do.
How does your altar building impact or affect others?
I think for me, the way in which I use it every day is in my work. It really has informed me about how important it is for each of us as human beings to acknowledge the people that have gone before, to understand the connection between the living and the dead, that really is not broken, that it is something that every day you are getting information, you are getting acknowledgement, you are having an experience with these people, whether you realize it or not. That for me was the biggest, I think, aha moment, was in being able to share with others, in teaching the intuitive work that I do, that yes, you can connect, that it doesn't take grandiosity, it doesn't take big dramatic things. It can be something as simple as a photograph, a candle, and a wish, and a desire to share that with others and to really bring them not necessarily back from the dead, but to venerate them in such a way that they are part of your everyday life.
Beautiful. So you talked about your biggest aha moment. What about your biggest healing?
I think for me, the biggest healing for me is when I deal with people that I don't necessarily agree with that have crossed over. It's when I can set aside that part of disconnect that we have, or discord, and I can say, I can honor you as who you were, and I don't have to worry about what we did or didn't agree on. It is about letting that go and letting it be what it is and putting it in its proper place and still respecting and honoring who they were as human beings.
Beautiful. What's one thing that you do to celebrate the life of a lost loved one besides altar building?
Well, for me, it is when I take walks. I'm a dog walker and a pet sitter and all of these things. And when I'm communicating and dealing with my animals and I'm taking walks, I also keep my eye out for eagles and cardinals. And I have a fun story. My grandmother loved Easter. She was very Catholic. And one day I was walking my dog that I was pet sitting for that day, and I was thinking of her. It was Easter Sunday. And I look down in the dirt, and I see a stone with a cross in it in the sidewalk dirt. And I thought, boy, if that's not Grandma, I don't know what is. And that now became a piece on my altar. So for me, that's kind of what it is it's every day I look for the signs. Every day I say hi and thank you. I also, for me, it's flowers, it's living things, it's building things in a physical sense as well.
Thank you, Christine. I
Thank you.
appreciate you. Pass it to Ojawaba. You can be last if you want. My brother, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Good to have you.
Good to be here.
So who are you today? And what do you want to share about how you're connected to the community?
I'm a black man from the deep south, and this place is home for me now. And one thing that you have to have in place in order to survive as a black person anywhere on the planet, but specifically in America, is to have healthy community. And so, I'm here because the people that I'm connected to allow me to survive and thrive. And you're part of that. So, it's good to be here with you today. And I also am busy or committed to supporting efforts in the communities that I'm a part of around addressing issues of police brutality and also black liberation, indigenous sovereignty, and in creating the systems of care and safety that we actually need, not the ones that have just been handed to us or built off of misappropriating our tax dollars.
So do you want to say anything more about your altar?
Yeah. So if we could actually go to the close-up, I can start with the most important part of it, which is the keys. If you go back one more slide. So in the last 20 years, maybe you have seen this report in the Star Tribune, but a day after Amir Locke was murdered by a SWAT team, there was a report published in the Star Tribune about how over the last 20 years, 215 people have been killed by police. And that's just in the last 20 years. And it may not be a sizable or significant number to some people, but it meant something to me. And so the keys on the shrine, there are about 215 of them, and each key represents someone who was slain by police. And the reason that I use those keys instead of images of the slain is, one, because there are too many.
Exactly.
The other is because they're not my blood relation, but I still feel affinity for them and a sense of care and respect for them, the lives that they led, and the fact that their lives were snatched too soon, and wanted to find a way to represent them in the shrine in a way that gave them respect and also acknowledged, one, that they had been captured, and two, that they were free now. And so these are handcuff keys. Yeah, and I'm happy to share more, but that's the main thing.
How did you become an altar builder?
My mother passed away, and where I'm from, I had the honor and the benefit of growing up in a place where African and indigenous spiritual traditions were highly visible and easy to access. And also, I knew that it was a technology that required a lot of responsibility. And I fortunately, I I was born into an old family, so I had a lot of elders in my family, including my grandmother who had passed before, and I had my own ways of staying in relationship and in familyhood with them. But when my mother passed away, it also opened up a pathway for me to go deeper into our African spiritual traditions. And so one of the main ways that I thought to stay in touch with her was through building a shrine for her and the rest of my blood relatives through some of the articles that she had left behind after we buried her. And so that happened maybe 12 years ago now. And since then, altar building and like the practices of like collecting items and intuitively finding those items to represent people and connect to our ancestors, connect to the dead has been something that I just probably was always meant to do, and it's been part of my practice since then.
Beautiful. Does your altar building affect others, impact others?
I think so. This is the first time that I have built communally, well, maybe not the first time that I've communally built an altar, but the first time that I set out with the intention to make it a communal practice. I think maybe to the memorials that popped up through the uprisings and that were forcibly torn apart by the city, that kind of gave me the affirmation that this is a practice that's needed and that people really gravitate towards, and that it's also a way to create like a point of entry for people into the movements that we need to have our self-determination, have our autonomy, keep ourselves safe. And so I imagine restaging this altar and building it again and again and again with different communities here in the cities so that we can create a space to really invite a future that does not have police,
Invite a future.
and also to have a space where we can honor and mourn our dead whose lives have been snatched by systems of policing and incarceration and war.
I do appreciate what you're saying, because anytime you pass by a memorial that is erected for someone slain by a tree in the street, a white bicycle, that's an altar.
Yep.
What is the most important healing lesson you've learned from altar building?
Well, one is that, and we spent a lot of time in the Kefren talking about this, of course. There's no beginning or end to the existence of the human spirit, or whatever the human spirit is before it comes here. And so I've always been able to take comfort and relief in the fact that the limitations that are imposed on us as human beings by the societies that we live in, or the limitations of our bodies, they can be escaped or transcended, and that we can still be in communication and in community with the spirits of the people, with the spirits of the dead, the folks who have left here, and gone on with an intention to become ancestors to us, to guide us from wherever they are and support us in whatever they do. So I get my healing knowing that making a space, making an altar for them is like making a cell phone to the people that we need to stay in touch with, even though they're not here in body.
What is one way you celebrate a lost loved one that isn't altar building?
Music, dance, make a meal. When my mother passed away, we had a big party. And in part it was because all of the BS that she had to deal with here on this plane of existence, she didn't have to deal with it no more.
Beautiful. Thank you. How you feel, Reverend Patience? You ready?
Good job.
You got this. Welcome. Who are you?
My name is Reverend Patience Carr. I'm an ordained minister with the Universal Life Church. I have been ordained with them since 2001. And the reason why, even though I have a very strong metaphysical and flying on the broom background, as they say, growing up down in the Bible Belt, you had to hide everything, especially when you grow up adopted and raised up. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Growing up down in the Bible Belt, you had to hide a lot and everything. So learning, the Southern conjure and the ways of the hoodoo and everything, we had to disguise everything behind, the Bible and the saints. And so that when people came, or like my African ancestry and some of our other, people here who have African ancestry, our slaves ancestry had to hide, our African traditions so master wouldn't beat us to death. Little did they know that we learned how to use their own stuff and be out in the open while hiding at the same time. Like, for instance, with the Bible, a lot of root workers and Southern practitioners, you'll see us having the Bible. And automatically people think, oh my God, they're a Christian. No, they're not. Because we recognize that the Bible is one of the strongest, powerful spell books. We have a saying down home that the Bible makes folks either wiser or they make them more of a fool. And the wise folk was another way of saying the witch, the healer, the root worker. So a lot of the times when we were building our altars and everything, even though we wanted, like for instance, when you look at my altar, people will get a vibe if they know anything about the Orishas or anything, they have a Yamaya or Jamaja, depending on where you're from, how you say her name. She's the mother of all Orishas, mother of the oceans, in the Yoruba tradition that comes from Nigeria, which is part of my ancestry. And so they would disguise them behind the different saints, so they could be, like I said, out in the open and do what you need to do. So anyone who come along and everything that was, very fundamental, Christian or whatever, they wouldn't get in trouble. Because surprisingly, even being in the 21st century, a lot of folk, the reason why they're drawn to the same style of tradition is because if you're not in the urban area and you out in the country and you try to be blatantly, I'm flying on the broom, I'm a witch, I'm this, I'm that, and everything, you're going to be lynched or driven out of town still to this day. In the big cities, everyone's more urban, they're more liberal, minded and everything. Like you go down to, Louisiana, everyone thinks everyone's like, all of Louisiana's like New Orleans. You go outside of New Orleans, they're going to lynch you in a second without even thinking twice. And it's also the same parts of Florida where I'm originally from and everything. If you were not a part of like Miami or Orlando or Tampa and everything, where being in the urban area, and you have like the Iglesia de la Sumi and of the Yoruba, and where it's more open, and people running around with all their lekis, showing, oh look at me, I'm initiated. In the country, you can't do that. So over the years, because of my ancestry and everything, in Spanish they call me Criolla, which is, the Spanish version of being, Creole. And with the recently, like she said, earlier, when you're adopted, you always grow up wanting to know who you are and who your ancestors are. And if you look at my altar, you'll see the picture of my abuelita. I never met this woman physically in this life. She died when I was 6 months old, but she's always been with me. I was born with the cowl over the face. In the Southwest, we call it having the veil. We automatically, they knew when a child was born with that, they were going to be able to have the gift of prophecy, seeing the spirits between our world and the spirit world with no problem. And so when I met my family and everything, my birth father laid out a stack pile. It was Christmas time, and Puerto Ricans love to have a big, huge fiesta. So everyone's dancing and having fun, and they literally, it's like you hear the big scratch on the record, and they're all looking at me crazy because I didn't know who my grandmother was. But when they stacked out the pictures, I pulled out her picture with the one you see on my altar, and said, that's Irene. That's my abuelita. They're like, how do you know that? Because she told me. She's been with me always. She's always guided me. And so through altar building, I started young when I was like about, 13, 14, you know, not knowing exactly who I was because of being adopted. Started out, with the Wicca traditions and then started getting more into my, the Native American and started, plus also when my adopted mom got really religious, it made me question, why do you guys say this? Why do you believe this way? And it got me into studying the different socialities of different societies, because I always knew I was of, a different background. So I was drawn to certain European countries, certain African, traditions and everything, certain Native American traditions. And as I was growing up, I always, people are like, what makes you put this on the altar? It's because I felt Spirit telling me to. Like I needed to put this or put that, drawn to certain thing, what they call being Spirit-led. And then recently, about 6 months ago, my little brother sent us the update from Ancestry.com, and coming to find out, almost all these different European tradition and African traditions and stuff that I thought were because of past lives, for those who believe in reincarnation, sometimes spiritual people like us, were, as they say, relearning what we already knew on the subconscious from our past lives. Well, partly that is that, but then when we looked at the new thing, update of our ancestry, a lot of it was ancestry the whole time guiding me and not even realizing it and everything. The European ancestry starting from Portugal, going all across the top of Northern Europe into Asia, the African ancestry starting from Morocco and Algiers and Tanzania, going down to the Congo and the Bantu people and Mali, and then going to Nigeria, and then have different areas of South Africa. And so when I started studying on different things, it made me realize, and that's how I got into my universal spiritual ministry and becoming a universal spiritual teacher, was that of, you say tomato, I say tomato, but we're doing a lot of very similar things, even like showing of our altars. Great if we have different ways of doing things, but we're doing it similarly with the same intent, using the same tools, even though we're speaking it in different languages or we're using it in a different spiritual, god or goddess or whatever ancestor that we're using it for, so that when people come to me, I don't care what religion or spiritual path you are, when it comes down to the tools that we use, they're universal, even though they're spoken in different languages.
What's one thing you do that helps you celebrate the loss of a loved one, other than altar building?
Similar to what, like my brother said, eating the foods that they used to eat, dancing to the music and listening to the music of, their, whatever favorite music they had and everything. And just doing, like wearing their favorite perfumes or, similar things like that.
Thank you. Thank you, Rev. Patience. One thing I want to add about celebrating is telling the stories of your loved ones. So I had a slide of each of my loved ones that I had to grieve and learn how to celebrate, to be able to let go and bring back a little bit more balance in my life. Telling their stories is a really good way to celebrate the loss of loved ones. Thank you, panelists. Can we stay here? Because I think we have audience questions from Facebook and from maybe those seated here.
Yeah, if anybody does have a question, Akiko can bring you a mic so that our Zoom audience can hear your question. Raise your hand. Over this, oops, right over there.
She's coming with the mic.
Hold on one sec, yeah, thanks.
She's coming with a mic.
She's right, yeah, thanks.
It's not on.
Hello?
There we go. Swan.
When spirit is communicating with you, and you're not certain, like how do you discern if it's misleading or a force other than a guiding, like or misguiding you or whatnot? Like, how do you discern? Or do you ever have a moment of questioning
Beautiful. I love this question.
the intention of that spirit?
Yes. I'm going to let everybody answer it. I'll go first. So the way that I discern if the spirit is for me, not against me, is when I'm moved emotionally. Emotionally in like tears, or I feel like hugged or safe, grounded. When I feel anxious, or when I feel like that's not me, then I know to tell it to go away and that they don't belong here.
One of the things I do to help with that is I keep because not all the time we can have our heads scarved, is I keep myself anointed on the 5 points with the lavender to keep that mental clarity and focus. Because many times, especially something that's malevolent, first thing they want to do is attach to our crown because of where the pineal gland sits and everything. And that's the main key that holds on to the soul. And so many a times, like when I'm teaching my students, they do, they have a problem with that. Not be, and they want it because they're not having that proper training. Malevolent entities, energies, spirits, whatever you like to call them, likes to take advantage of people like that. And that's how they get diagnosed, being schizophrenic and everything. So your self-love and self-care, you have to discipline yourself to want to make a daily habit of putting your crown on so you can keep yourself, like she said, determining, what is yourself and what is something else trying to, do something malevolent or come into your sacred space without, you welcoming it, and you can tell it, to go away.
I think that if you have a family shrine or a practice of venerating your family ancestors, it gives you a good base to start from, because they'll protect you. The only spirits that I tend to work with are my family spirits, because I know that of all the many multitudes that are out there, they have my best interests at heart, because they're the ones who brought me here in the first place. And I would also say that, if you have that family practice, then one of the things that that Khusaba actually taught me about is OB, like some form of divination that is rooted in you communicating with the ancestors of your family to kind of validate or invalidate messages that you're getting can also help with discernment. Because again, it's like you have your own intuitive opinion, and then you doing some form of divination that's connected to your family line is you getting, not even getting a second opinion, but getting like your grandmama wisdom, basically, on how she would approach it if she were in your shoes or in your skin, so to speak.
Well, I've run into that myself a few times. I tend to do some house cleaning for people, and what I do is a grounding technique. I try to make sure that what I'm absorbing is kept within a dome, and that it circles and cycles through the earth's core, because that for me is a powerful cleanser. And then what I also do is I will write down the questions that I'm getting on a piece of paper, and after I've grounded, I will revisit the question or what I've gotten and really tap into my own intuition and ask myself the question, does this really resonate? Is this something useful for me? Is it really meant for me? And if after a few days it starts to fade, then I say, you know what, probably not for me. Probably someone just trying to get their 2 cents in. If it's something that I revisit and I get more information on and I get more clarity around, then I think it's for me. Then it's something I can use as a tool. But mostly when we're given information that is for us, it does have a useful purpose. At least that's what I've found.
So we have a question on Zoom.
Hey, y'all.
Hi, Zoom. Basically, there's some language, some references to Kefra, mostly that. I think I wonder
wanna
if you
know
want
what
to
it
just
is?
touch just briefly.
Absolutely. So the Kefren Society exists to awaken the black man and the black woman. And the Kefren knowledge philosophy comes from Kemet. And the Kefren knowledge philosophy is a community of people that decided to live together with a cultural consciousness and be competent in the ways of their people. So a Kefren society has existed in embracing culture, tradition, rituals for over 30 years. And I've gone through womanhood training and was given my womanhood name, Khusaba Seka, through the Kefren Society. And that's how I started building altars and learning how to be in community and in sisterhood. And I'm very thankful to have had that grounding, especially being that it lined up right with me becoming a mom.
Beautiful. Almost 30. Sorry. And then on Zoom, I just have appreciation, additional appreciation specifically sent to Christine and all she's such a gift to those who she reads and to the world and beyond. So I think we could spread that, yes, to each of the panelists. I think it's 2:24. I think we could take one more question if there's a question in the audience. I see, yeah? Of course, it's on the other side. There we go. Thanks.
Hotep.
Hotep.
So it's not a question, it's more of a comment. And I just want to say thank you, Sister Khusaba. It's a real honor to watch you do this work. And I think I texted you a couple days ago just saying how proud I am. Just watching you in this journey with all the different transitions that I, know. And yeah, you're radiant. Your spirit is very illumined, and proud of all of you guys. So thank you.
Thank you, Sister Sahat. I'd like to ask each of our panelists how they can be contacted.
Well, I have a very arduous website. It's christineintuitivemedium.wordpress.com. Or you can email me at cspsychic, which is easier, Gmail. Thank you.
If you want to book me for a teaching session or even spiritual advisor or anything like that, you can contact me through Rev Patience Spiritual Ministry on the Facebook. And also, every Wednesday night at 7 p.m., I do a live spiritual tea time with Reverend Patience. I bring on different spiritual teachers from various spiritual and religious backgrounds, and I do interviews. Sometimes we, besides talking on topics, if they do readings or anything like that, we do that as well. And you can also, under the YouTube channel is under the same name as my Facebook page, Rev Patience, and Patience is spelled P-A-Y-S-H-E-N-C-E, Spiritual Ministry.
If you're interested in learning more about the Shrine to Abolition, or you want to bring it to the community that you're part of, I'm just going to be standing by it in the back, and you come and talk to me.
Any other questions? You all saw my contact information online. Do we have a mic for the person in the front? Thank you.
Thank you. So, you all seem to have such a rich spiritual background that I so admire. And I feel like I'm born and raised in Minnesota and have a very Protestant Lutheran background that I was raised in and have never resonated with. And my family is all very religious. To me, it all felt performative more than anything else. It never really got me in the heart and in my soul. And so I'm kind of the black sheep of my family where having little altars or having different spiritual beliefs than religious beliefs. Just wondering, I struggle with like that, making those connections that you all seem to have so deeply. And just wondering if you can give any advice or, guidance on how, on a more spiritual level than religious level, to be able to connect
Yes.
in our hearts.
I love your question. What's your name?
Jen.
Thank you, Jen. So you can start with a white piece of paper and write down all the names of your loved ones that have passed on that are related to you. If you have like a really deep connection to somebody who is not bloodline related to you, you can add them too, but you have to know that you're already in good standing with them. That's a really beautiful way to pay tribute that doesn't have a religious tie to it. You can frame it. You can say their names when you need to be uplifted or when you know you need to uplift their family members. Like maybe you have a cousin and their mom passed, and so you say your sister's name, you know what I'm saying? To help their family, not just the loved one that passed for the light, you know what I mean? So white piece of paper, a simple candle, a little flower is all good. When I built my altar in the back, it's a two-part altar. It took me years to get to this point in altar building. My first altar was on a basement floor in a corner in what we call Efun or Cascarilla. And it was the 9 rays of light, and their pictures and their flowers were down there. And I didn't want to work with it often. And then I learned how to invite other spirits that knew me or needed rest that weren't going to do any harm to me or my family. And I expanded into what's called a Bovada style. And so that is an interpretation of an altar. I wouldn't have altar like that together right now. So I just want to tell you, where you start is where you start. At least you began. Okay? Thank you, Jen. Anybody else want to answer that or add to that?
Yes, I'd say explore. I guess I would say I started out similarly to you, and at 6 years old, I rebelled against the Catholic Church. Wasn't well received with the family. So what I ended up doing is I would explore. I explored all different types of dogma, religions, ideas, thoughts, and I kind of picked what I chose or what resonated, and I created my own process around that, much like with the piece of paper, much like with whatever resonates with you. I suggest trying that first, or not first, but as a choice, and then just owning it. It isn't about what anybody else thinks. I've been told I'm going to hell. It's okay, I got my box with my nameplate on it. It's all good. And so you just have to kind of own what works.
We're good?
We're good.
My mom. Akiko, could we hand a mic to my mom? Wait a second, I have to do the same thing for my mom that I did for my dad. How many people know my mom?
Hello? Yeah. Hi, I'm Linda Brozick. Khusaba is my daughter, my oldest daughter. And, unbeknownst to even myself, I guess I have altars in my house. One is a shelf, a beautiful shelf that was my grandmother and grandfather's, that was given to them by my grandfather's mother. And she came over from England on a ship, pregnant with a 2-year-old, which was my grandfather. So that's that
Grandpap
side.
Webb.
Yeah, Grandpap Webb and Grandma Webb, Grandma Ethel Lundy. The other one has been kind of scattered, but still in one place, of my dad, Standing Bear, William Kimmy. And a lot of things that he owned, some are still packed, and I'd love to be able to have the space to unpack them. So I kind of think these are altars, but I've had negative comments about don't, build, what was the word? I can't think of the word. but don't, have all these things of your dad, especially, because I have so much. But the other thing is, I am a Christian, and I believe in the Bible. So I don't know how many others are here that believe that, and it's okay. I've had trouble with believing what Khusaba believes in, but I accept it now. That's my daughter. I love her, and if this is good for her, it's good. It's good. So, just wanted to
Thanks,
say
Mom. I'm going to let one of the other altar builders kind of address what she should do with some of the things that she wants to celebrate and memorialize my grandfather with.
I do understand the concept of clutter and having too much. And so, yeah. And so I had to learn to pick and choose. And so maybe the recipe box we keep, and maybe the 10, 15, 20, 55 cookbooks we get rid of. And so I guess that's what I would look at, is what really, again, resonates with you. What you feel called to keep, keep. What you know is just bad hoarding habits, we learn to get rid of.
To riff off of Auntie Christine, one of the more beautiful things that I learned about burial traditions from building shrines is that the things that we bury people with are the tools that they will use in the other world or wherever they go to and when they come back. And so if there are particular items that that your father used to use in life, like if you have a toolbox of his, I would keep that and put that on the shrine, because he might come back and need them. Things that they used to wear, and then things that they enjoy eating, drinking, smoking, whatever. Because it's about making a space that is comfortable for them when they come back to visit.
I will say that a lot of us are collectors of artifacts and cultural items. And so for those of us in the audience that do collect those types of things, remember that the people that used to have them or made them are probably gone. And you can decorate your house in a cultural motif and not have it be a shrine or a mausoleum, but you also can have that special sacred space that is your altar, that you go and acknowledge them and pray, and still have a motif of culture and acknowledgement of self. So there is a balance that can be achieved, and don't shy away from having cultural artifacts because you're scared that you're building whole altar. If it feels funny, don't bring it in your house. You know that about the thrift store too, right? So you want to say something about shopping at the thrift store?
Whew, okay. Yes, child. Okay, I live about an hour and a half north of here, and I work in a little thrift store called Heritage Thrift Store, and love them because they're owned by a nonprofit called Phase Industries, which actually is ran by the state. We work with people who are handicapped and on the autistic spectrum, giving these adults, job skills and everything. And I work at their thrift store, and it's literally right on the crossroads of 23 and 65. And anybody who, especially dealing with, either Hecate or in our African traditions with Papa Legba and everything, know about the crossroads. The crossroads are a spiritual vortex. So we always got something going on in the store. Also, too, we also receive a lot of things from different, older people who have passed away. I mean, the local nursing home, if no one comes and claims their stuff, they have sent literally everything from the sheets that they defecated in when they died down to their dentures. And So when people are going to those different places, I always remind them, you need to be careful, especially like if you go to Old Estate, or the thrift store, be careful what you're buying. Because so if you go to pick something up that looks like, especially if it looks like an old artifact or something, especially from another culture, or make sure that if you are having that funny feeling, like at work, we keep a huge multi-purpose bottle full of Florida water. And then for those who don't know what that is, down in the South, we also in Spanish, we call it agua de Florida. It's originally a perfume made back in the early 1800s for upper crust New York's, but they realized with this different blending of it, it was great for banishing and protecting and giving of offerings, and more or less like holy water on steroids. And so we keep that constantly, to spray down things. We even have an altar now right by the register and everything, because 99.9% of the people who come into the store are Christian. I hide everything behind the Catholic saints, like I talked about before. Since Papa Legba, and sometimes he's called Eshu, depending on the, what your tradition is. I use Saint Anthony to represent him and everything. And it was cute though. My participants have started getting into it now. So almost every other morning, I'll walk into the store and you'll find new things at the altar, and it all correlates with dealing with him. There's dice because he likes to gamble and party. Some of y'all may know him down in New Orleans as Baron Zamati. They like to, and so when you go to those places, especially dealing like mirrors, as soon as they come in, spray them down. I highly recommend an easy fix, white vinegar, 3 tablespoons of salt, kosher salt, sea salt, pink Himalayan salt added to it, and juice of a lemon. Shake that all up. In the hoodoo and conjure tradition, we pray Psalms 23 over it, and then you spray it down, and then you clean it counterclockwise, because mirrors are portals to the spirit world. So especially when, like, you go to, like I said, anytime, because some of the best places to go to are your, like you said, thrift stores, antique stores, estate sales, to find new stuff for your altars and everything. But also, if it's been used by other people, their energy is attached to it and everything. Short story, when I first started working there, we had this beautiful porcelain pink and white urn that was owned by this lady. And her stuff was given to and donated everything when she passed, including her urn. After they gave her, they didn't want to keep it. And we had this lady come in. She was absolutely in tears. She just came from across the street, because the main hospital in Moore is right across the street from the store. In tears, her mom had just passed away from the COVID. And because of her and her brothers and everybody, being out of work during the lockdown, they didn't have the kind of money for the funeral her mom originally wanted. And the urn she wanted was the minimum of $10,000. This fancy porcelain urn with gold, 24 karat gold inlay and all that kind of good stuff. Well, lo and behold, the little old lady's spirit was still attached to the urn. And I had that, I'm a psychic medium. Like, I see, smell, hear, all of it. So as the lady's talking to me, I could see the little old lady, type of thing, like, tell her about my urn. And when the lady showed me the picture, I could see why the little old lady was telling me it was the same exact one that her mom wanted. And we were selling it for $2.75. So it's loving stories like that I, are great. But like I said, some things that come attached and everything, be careful, because you never know. And that's why it's always good to make a habit automatically cleanse and spiritually cleanse, especially besides physically cleansing. Anything you buy, like I said, from the thrift store, estate sales, wherever you find, those type of things.
Thank you, Brad. I just want to say in appreciation of Mia and my distinguished panelists, thank you. You mean a lot to me. You make my work stronger for the community and for myself, and I appreciate you. May the ancestors be pleased.